So we're jumping into some pretty wild stuff right off the bat. Stuff that might sound like, I don't know, pure fantasy, but it comes straight from our source today.
Oh.
Yuvraj Srivastava, or UV. And he actually said that even ghosts, even spirits, have a certain smell.
Hmm.
And he described it as, get this, blissful.
Wow.
Yeah, so this guy, UV, he's our focal point today. It's fascinating. He basically traded city life for, like, the Himalayan mountains.
Okay.
So we're diving deep right into Sanatan Dharma,
Right.
specifically Kashmiri Shaivism or Trika and the world of Tantra.
Big topics.
Huge topics.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it all through his eyes, through his experiences, which he shared in a recent interview. Super personal, often really mind-blowing stuff.
Sounds like it.
It is.
So what's interesting right away is UV's background, right? This isn't some guy raised in a monastery or anything.
Right.
He was an engineer, super into fitness, even a power lifter. So that contrast between his old life and, well, being a monk, basically,
Yeah.
makes you wonder what kind of internal shift makes someone do that.
It's a huge change.
Huge. And those years he spent living with sages in the Himalayas, that must play a big role in, like, shaping his whole worldview.
Totally. And you know what's insightful? How he sees those labels people give him, sadhu or tantri. He's like, those aren't who I am. They're more like tools,
I see.
methods, upaya, ways to understand yourself, your true self, beyond any one label. It's all about that inner search.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. And for our listeners, it's good to remember these terms, they're different paths within Sanatan Dharma, but all aiming for the same thing, self-realization. So UV is really focused on the experience, not the label.
Right. And when we hear Tantra, most of us, well, we might have some, let's say, popular ideas, often the westernized version.
Yeah, you mean.
UV even said that his initial understanding was all about the 5 M's.
Yeah.
But that's barely scratching the surface.
Not even close. And here's a correction he makes about Kashmiri Shaivism itself. The real name isn't that, it's Triya.
Huh.
Sometimes Trika, or even Parada, which is what the scholar Abhinavagupta used.
So the Kashmir part is historical, but Triya is the system.
Exactly.
And speaking of Abhinavagupta, UV really emphasizes how much this guy did. Compiling tons of ancient wisdom into actual texts, we could probably do several deep dives just on him.
Easily. And the key here is Abhinavagupta wasn't just some scholar. He practiced Triya. So he's writing from experience.
Lived it.
Exactly. And for you listening, what makes him so important is how systematic his work is. He basically mapped out consciousness and reality according to Triya, showing how it all comes from one divine source. And UV saying we'd need multiple deep dives, that tells you something.
For sure. So UV's Triya journey starts in Kashmir, and it seems like visiting the Birva cave, originally Bava, was a turning point.
Okay.
This cave, it's linked to Abhinavagupta himself, though sadly, UV said it's pretty run down now, but he got to meditate there several times.
Powerful.
Yeah, makes you think about the energy in those kinds of places,
Definitely. And UV talks about the whole energy of Kashmir. Historically, it was the land of Bhairava, like a really intense manifestation of the divine. Yeah. But now he says there's candid energy, meaning fragmented, scattered. He even felt wailing, crying in some spots, maybe echoes of past trauma, even massacres. So you have this contrast, this potent spiritual place, but also these disturbances.
That's heavy stuff.
It is.
And then, this is like straight out of a spiritual storybook, he meets his guru in Srinagar.
Right.
And he describes it as love at first sight, a totally profound, stunning experience. And that's when he really gets into Triya, specifically the 36 Tattvas, which we'll get to. But that connection, that's huge, right?
Those instant, deep connections with a guru, they're often described as like soul recognition.
Yeah.
And for you listening, it shows that the right teacher appears when you're ready, which UV talks more about.
It's like that inner readiness meeting the outer guide.
Exactly.
Which leads to his message about preparing for a guru, especially for those doing Nam Jap already. He's clear, your own preparation matters.
Makes sense.
He says, the guru appears based on how ready you are, so it might not be the, super guru we imagine.
Right.
But someone perfect to guide you to that next level.
That's so important for anyone on this path.
Yeah.
And that analogy he uses, the bowl, the patra, is perfect. He's saying that sadhana, things like Nam Jap, they make your bowl bigger so you can receive more.
Like you can hold more knowledge, more wisdom.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that inner space.
So true. And speaking of powerful practices, UV shares his experience with the Muhammad Ra HR Mahamantra.
Okay.
This is after he left his old life, went to the Himalayas. And he says the mantra became automatic, like it was always in his mind, even doing normal things.
Wow.
He felt guilty at first, but his guru said it's a good sign when the mantra chants you.
That's interesting, going from consciously repeating it to it being like part of your being,
Right.
almost like the universe is humming inside you. It
Yeah.
means it's gone deeper beyond just the mind into your whole consciousness. And that can lead to big shifts, like UV said, certain faculties unlocked, inner potential.
Following that, he talks about some wild sensory stuff. He smelled this cosmic smell during meditation,
Huh.
like burning copper or how astronauts describe space. He said, crazy but blissful. Definitely not an earthly smell.
I've heard similar things in deep meditative states.
What could it mean?
Maybe as consciousness expands, we start to perceive things that are normally beyond our senses.
Like subtler energies, different dimensions.
Possibly. The astronaut comparison is interesting, points to something beyond our everyday reality.
Yeah, he also mentions hearing wailing in Bangalore with his guru.
Oh.
Not like a normal sound. His guru said it was a chodal calling, which that pushes the boundaries a bit.
It does, but it shows how spiritual practice can make you sensitive to energies, entities that most people don't pick up on.
And his guru heard it too, so it wasn't just in his head.
Exactly. Maybe they were perceiving other realms or some energetic phenomenon.
So then we get to the divine in reality. According to Trika, UV says Paramashiva is beyond even the 36 tattvas,
Right.
which are the structure of existence itself.
Right. It's important to understand the tattvas aren't like levels you climb. They're more like categories, principles that make up reality, from the physical stuff to the subtlest consciousness.
And Paramashiva is beyond all that, the source everything comes from.
And goes back to, it's not a hierarchy, but an interconnected web, all valid expressions of the divine.
And Shakti is the Vimarsa, the reflecting power of Shiva, which starts manifestation through the Ika, Jnana, and Kriya Shaktis.
It's like the creative dynamism of the universe.
Can you break down Vimarsa a little more?
Think of it as consciousness becoming self-aware, like a mirror. Shakti as Vimarsa lets Shiva, who's pure consciousness, see his own potential, and that's how manifestation begins.
Through will, knowledge, action.
Exactly. Ika, Jnana, Kriya, the divine intention, the blueprint, and the actual making of everything.
So UV goes deep into the Himalayas for his sadhana to shed worldly attachments, focus on practice.
Classic.
Looking back, he even realizes his initial reasons were maybe a bit naive, but what he experienced there was huge. Why are the Himalayas so significant for seekers?
Lots of reasons. The grandeur, the isolation, it naturally makes you introspective, detaches you from worldly distractions.
And the energy there is supposed to be powerful.
Very. It's said to amplify spiritual practices. So even if UV's initial motivation wasn't perfect, that seeking solitude, that intention can still lead to transformation.
He went to some super remote places like Karal, which is even past Gangotri.
Wow.
And he met all these sadhus, each with their own story. One thing that stood out was about sadhus who might seem like they're just acting, not doing intense practices.
Right.
But he was told that just enduring the Himalayas, the harsh conditions, that is a subconscious sadhana.
That's profound. It shows how environment, hardship can be transformative.
The cold, the isolation, you need serious inner strength to handle that.
You do, and even without rituals or meditation, that survival strips away attachments, purifies you.
It's like accidental spiritual growth.
In a way, yeah.
UV also described the daily life of a sadhu in Gangotri, waking up before dawn, bathing in the freezing Ganga, hours of meditation, one simple meal a day. Super disciplined. He even said that coming back to this city, all the noise and stuff, it was almost unbearable after being in the mountains.
That contrast shows how solitude and practice affect you. You become so sensitive, the city feels overwhelming.
It makes you think about how our environment impacts us every day.
For sure.
And then he has these incredible encounters. He meets a sadhu in Vag, of all places, who claims to be thousands of years old.
What?
Yeah, even talking about events from way back. And this guy was living as a normal businessman, which goes into this idea of Shiva's concealment.
Right, like advanced beings hiding in plain sight.
And it mentions the Chiranjeevis, those supposedly immortal beings.
How do we even wrap our heads around that?
I know, right?
Well, in Indian traditions, such beings are possible through advanced yoga, divine grace, and that idea of Shiva's concealment. It reminds us that you can't judge a book by its cover, spiritually speaking.
And the Chiranjeevis just add to the mystery, the possibility of life beyond what we know.
Exactly.
Now, UV's guru was against using things like cannabis for sadhana, emphasizing sobriety, clear awareness, and UV himself chose to stop eating meat after a really intense experience at a butcher shop.
That raises the question of different paths. What works for one person might not for another.
Totally.
UV's lineage Focusing on sobriety, that's common. The idea that clarity is key for inner exploration. Some Shakta traditions might differ on things like meat, but UV's experience shows it's about personal conscious, listening to yourself.
It's your own journey.
Exactly.
He also felt Bhairava's energy, not as a physical form, but this powerful force right in front of him.
Wow.
And then his guru actually touched UV's feet as a blessing, which is so humbling.
That shows the depth of these traditions, how unpredictable they can be.
So, like, divine energy can manifest in so many ways, a feeling and understanding, even a humble gesture from a master.
And that humility, it shows that true spiritual authority is beyond ego.
It's about connections.
Grace. Absolutely.
UV also talked about attracting both higher and lower beings, lower ones wanting your energy. So protection is important, especially during deeper practices like upassanas.
Yeah, that idea of spiritual practice opening you up to different energies, it's common in esoteric traditions.
As your own energy grows,
Yeah.
it becomes visible to other beings.
Right, so protection is key during advanced practices to keep negative influences away.
He had a few entity encounters, even before his guru, including this sleep paralysis thing with a smoky gray female entity, super unsettling.
Those experiences can be scary.
Very. But on the flip side, he felt Hanuman's presence during Nam Jap in his Gangotri cave.
Really?
It was blissful, and his guru confirmed it later.
That's amazing. It shows the two sides of this path, the challenging and the blissful.
Finally, the confirmation from his guru is important. It shows that devotion and practice can attract benevolent forces.
Absolutely.
UV feels super connected to Gangotri, calls it his spiritual womb.
Powerful.
He also clarified that while the Gamga seems to come from the Gangotri glacier, Gomukh, the true source, is further back, in Tibet.
Like a hidden origin.
Yeah, and he said the feeling at Gomukh is beyond words, pure bliss, so certain places really do hold spiritual power.
That reverence for the Ganga, for Gomukh, it's deep in Indian tradition. And that idea of a hidden source, it's like saying the sacred has deeper roots than we see.
In his description of the bliss at Gomukh, you can feel the energy of the place.
You can.
He then talks about Bharat, India, as a holy land, mentioning the Shakti Pethas, the legend of Sati's bodies scattered across the land.
Right.
He even pointed out that ancient temples like Hinglaj Mata, now in Pakistan, are still active. So there's this spiritual continuity that goes beyond borders and time.
That idea of India as a sacred landscape, marked by these powerful sites, it shows the deep spiritual heritage of the region.
And the fact that those places are still revered, even across borders, it says something about the enduring power of these traditions.
It does.
Moving into the more esoteric stuff, we talked about Agoras, Kapalikas, where Kapal means skull, and Siddha Purushas.
Right.
UV said that Agoras and other Shivaite sects fall under the umbrella of Shiva Shuran.
Okay.
He had good interactions with Agoras, said they have a distinct energy.
So what sets these groups apart?
Well, it's about different approaches to Shiva. The Kapalikas, they use skulls in their practices. The Agoris, they're often misunderstood, but they all share this idea of transcending norms, seeing everything as divine.
UV's experience shows that appearances can be deceiving. Their practices might seem different, but their inner state could be very deep.
Then we got to defining a Siddha Purusha, or Mahila, basically a master filled with the divine. UV made a distinction from how the West sees enlightenment.
Right.
He said enlightenment is being flooded with light, prasha and vimarsha, illumination and understanding.
So it's not just about knowledge, but experience too.
And he said having siddhis, special powers, isn't the same as enlightenment. He even saw a siddhi demonstration. And his guru cautioned against getting caught up in that. It can feed the ego.
That's so important. Cities can be cool, but they're not the goal.
The goal is realizing your own divine nature, transcending the ego. That's true liberation.
Focusing on cities can actually hold you back.
UV's guru's perspective is like a reminder to stay focused on what really matters. Interestingly, UV was told that places like Karl and Gangotri are usually free of negative entities, maybe because of the Ganga's purifying power.
That makes sense.
His experience matched that. He mostly felt higher, more positive energies.
That idea of sacred spaces being protected, energetically charged, it's common.
Like the Ganga creates this field that repels negativity, makes it easier to connect to higher states.
It's like a spiritual safe haven.
We also talked about past births and curing samskaras, those mental impressions. UV stressed that liberation, mukti, is about escaping the cycle of karma and reactions, detaching from outcomes. He even used Vishnu as an example, how even he's bound by his vow.
That concept of karma, rebirth, liberation, it's central to many Indian traditions.
It's like our actions keep us bound until we let go of attachment, realize our true nature, and Vishnu's example shows how universal that principle is.
Powerful stuff.
Yuvi also shared about being in nature in the Himalayas, seeing wild animals, feeling the energy of ancient trees and stones, even at Everest Base Camp.
Wow.
He talked about time feeling different, a connection to the distant past. It makes you realize how alive nature is, how much history it holds.
Those experiences show how connected everything is, and being in those powerful places, it can shift your perception of time, connect you to something deeper.
Lastly, we got into Naga culture. Yuvi said Kashmir was the land of Nagas. Lots of places ended in ag there.
Right.
He said Nagas could be highly evolved beings or ancient tribes with their own practices.
Interesting.
He said their influence in Kashmir is older than Vedic rituals, and Naga worship is still strong in South India. These unbroken lineages are powerful.
Especially in tribal Tantra.
He even wondered about a link between Kashmir's Nagas and Nagaland today, and how some Naga influence might still be in Kashmir.
You can find those remnants if you look closely.
He wants us to imagine seeing the world like a Naga, with heightened senses, intuition, solitude. He even said they might have practiced before mantras, focusing on embodying energy.
That's fascinating. It gives us a glimpse of these ancient traditions, the Nagas, how they shaped India's spiritual landscape.
And that idea of them practicing before mantras, focusing on direct experience, it shows how spiritual techniques evolved.
And the deep roots of Tantra in India.
And here's a personal thing UV shared. He kept seeing lizards in the city during his sadhana,
Okay.
and feeling snakes, especially cobras, during meditation and rituals in the Himalayas.
Ah.
He said he gradually lost his fear, felt connected to them, even talked about the snake inside, Kundalini energy, and how all beings are on this journey back to the source.
The snake, it's such a powerful symbol, transformation, Kundalini, the cycles of life and death.
It's like he's integrating those symbols, realizing how connected we all are.
Beautiful.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to think about the connections UV showed us, the subtle energies, the ancient wisdom, the power of nature.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but think about how his journey, with all its wild experiences and deep exploration, might resonate with your own curiosity, your own path.
Everyone's path is different.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on this dive into these amazing, often surprising topics.
It's been a journey.
It has. We encourage you to keep exploring Sanatana, Kashmiri Shaivism, Tantra, based on what UV shared.
There's always more to learn.
Absolutely. The journey continues long after we're done talking.
It does.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.